Hello everyone, and welcome back to another TSW2 gameplay video. This time I'm doing something a little bit simple, because today we're on the Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr, or Duisburg to Bochum. And this time we're just going to drive the BR425 from Bochum Hauptbahnhof all the way to Duisburg on the run-of-the-mill RE11 service, which I think in real life I think it covers like the section from like Hamm Westfalia Hauptbahnhof to Düsseldorf, but in this instant, but the destination display that you have to set up here only shows it doesn't say RE11 to Düsseldorf. It just says Mönchengladbach. So I guess we'll just have to go with that. Let me turn the interior lights on. Goes to show you how familiar I am with the BR425. Also might as well get the number of the second unit. It's unit 44. The main thing I was going to try with this run was seeing how well I could do in foggy weather, because normally I just drive in really basic sunny conditions. And generally that, in some ways, I suppose it's a bit too easy. Oh, excuse me. Just need to clear my throat for some reason. Trying to get a decent angle on both of these trains here, without the overhead wires getting in the way too much. And we're off. Yeah, this morning I installed a little patch on the Train Sim community website that gets rid of that strange dong noise that you hear when you complete an objective. I mean, it wasn't too much of an issue for me, but I suppose it's better to not have it. That's probably what I'd say if I ever catch the Rona. And hang about. I've never noticed that other line curving off to the right there. Might have to look into that once I'm done, once I've finished this run. Right, that station that's coming up on our left is Bochum Ehrenfeld, and that's only served by S-Bahn trains, of course. So, because one of the few notable things about this Duisburg to Bochum route is that you've actually got like this. Well, Dovetail included both routes between Essen and Bochum. One of them goes via the S-Bahn lines with a lot more stations, and then there's this fast route which we're on today that only has two stations, which are Essen Süd and Wattenscheid. But for whatever reason, none of these regular timetable mode services actually stop at Essen Süd. And I think from memory, the only one that does across this whole add-on is actually in one of the scenarios. So yeah, I'm a bit puzzled with the situation in Essen Süd. Now, from memory, last time I tried driving, one of the more recent times I tried this run, I ended up completely overshooting the platform at Wattenscheid, or at the very least came in too fast, which is kind of like what happened the other day when I was attempting to drive the BR423 on Schnellfahrstrecke Köln to Aachen as part of that strange new Journeys expansion that Dovetail brought out a couple of days ago. Now, one trick I remember it's not really a trick, but one technique I remember from driving these German EMUs is that you want to try and get into the platform no faster than 60 kilometres an hour, and make sure you're down to around 40 or 35 when you're about 100 metres from the stopping point. I mean, that generally works in cases where a platform is long enough for 8 coaches. But I mean, the other night when I was trying to drive the DB BR143 from Chemnitz to Dresden, I tried that same technique until I remembered that the platforms on that route are a lot shorter than, well, most of the platforms on that route are a lot shorter than say this one here at Wattenscheid. And I realise now that I'm coming up to the platform way too slowly. This train has certainly got some very good brakes. I remember that, like, for the longest time I've been thinking that the BR425 is one of the best German EMUs that we've got in TSW, and I say that mainly because of the sounds of the unit as well as the physics. And this locomotive that's just turned up is of course the BR146.2, which comes with the either Mein Spessartbahn or Nachwerke Dresden. And I'm pretty sure that when you see these engines in the Doppelstockwagen coaches on the route between Duisburg and Bochum, I think it's the RE4, or they run the RE4 service through here, and that goes from, if I'm not mistaken, RE4 is like the regional express service between Aachen and Dortmund. Although last I checked, can someone translate that for me, please? I can't speak German. As I was saying, I'm pretty sure RE4, or at least how it is now, I think it's operated by National Express, who use like their own fascinating grey and blue variants of the Talent 2. Speaking of which, the Talent 2, at least in TSW, is a train that you will not see on Duisburg to Bochum. I see my hunch about the BR425 having good sound is still valid. I mean, not valid, but it still makes sense, because as you've just heard. And the other thing is that you get those good sounds like right out of the box. Like, you don't need to faff around installing any mods for this particular train. However, there are some cases, I think, where you do need to install sound mods. Well, not you don't need to, but it's it's something I would certainly recommend for certain trains, especially the Class 313, because even though the default sounds aren't too bad, the horn in the 313 mod pack that I've downloaded, that's enough to win me over as far as I'm concerned. The horn with this 313 mod pack makes the sound so much louder and angrier than the default 313 horn, which incidentally is the same recording that Dovetail used for the Class 314 with the Cathcart Circle line. And speaking of things being loud and angry, that's, well, it's not really angry, but it's why I like songs like We're Not Gonna Take It from Twisted Sister, The Warrior from Scandal and Patti Smythe, and Take Me Home Tonight from Eddie Money. Even though all three of those songs are ridiculously short. But I realise that that's not the point, that me talking about 80s rock music is not the point of this video, so I'll try to get back on track. No pun intended, especially in this case. I thought that was a station, but no, it's just more sound barriers. Oh, 140 speed limits. Good thing I noticed that in time. And this is Essen Süd station that we're passing through now. It's like Cargo Fleet and what else? Yeah, it's basically just like Cargo Fleet on the Tees Valley line, where that's a station that Dovetail included, but bizarrely no services actually stop there in timetable mode, and I don't think there's even any scenarios where you get to stop a train at Cargo Fleet. So in that sense, it's even worse off than Essen Süd. And actually, come to think of it, it begs the question: like, do any services actually stop at Essen Süd in real life? So I'm a bit puzzled as to why Dovetail have set it up the timetable for this route so that no trains stop there, unless it's in that one scenario. It's kind of like with what they did with the Long Island Railroad, where for whatever reason they included Long Island City, despite the fact that the passenger services to that station are only run by diesel locomotives and not the like M3, M7 or M9 EMUs. And there are two scenarios where you can, one scenario where you go into Long Island City and then another when you go out of that station. But one of those scenarios uses the M7 and the other uses the M3. So I'm really quite confused, because it just seems like going to all that effort of accurately modelling Long Island City Station and all the sidings and buildings nearby. It all just seems wasted when you can't go to that station in like normal timetable mode. The only way you could go there outside of the scenarios, I suppose, would be if you went and meddled with the scenario designer. Although personally, I don't use that scenario designer all that often, if at all. As I think it was Alan Thompson once put it, it's a glorified quick drive, and you don't get anywhere near as much freedom to put in sort of trains and stops and what have you as you do with the scenario editor and Train Simulator. That's one area I think where Train Simulator where Train Simulator absolutely triumphs over its modern successor. And throughout all that chattering, I've neglected to mention that we're of course arriving at Essen Hauptbahnhof. Now here's an interesting little tidbit that you might be curious to know. If you're any bit familiar with the Docklands Light Railway in London, you'll know that, well, if you're familiar with the rolling stock at least, you might know that the original, I think it was P86 or P87 stock that was running on the network when it first opened in 1987. Some of those original DLR trains are running on the metro system here in Essen, which, as far as I know, is called the U-Bahn. I think they still call it the U-Bahn here, but to me it doesn't really feel like a traditional underground system, kind of like the Frankfurt U-Bahn. And one other thing I know about Essen is that it's I don't know if it's a starting point, but it's definitely a waypoint for like intercity trains. So I once watched a video from, I think it was Dylan's Travel Reports, where it was either him or Super Alp's Travels, where he got on a train, an intercity train here at Essen, or Essen Hauptbahnhof, and I forget where he went, but he actually showed the section between Essen and Duisburg. But I know from memory, the video was the consist that he was on was like those white intercity coaches hauled by a DB BR101, which is quite cool because, of course, that's obviously the section between Essen and Duisburg, and the BR101 are both in excuse me, they're both in TSW. Those hiccups are not. And yeah, it's a very rare thing to watch one of those travel report videos to find that the part of the route that they're covering is in TSW. It's more often than not you'll find like them covering routes that are in Train Simulator more than TSW. For instance, if I was ever going to do a trip report video myself, I'd probably try to, I don't know, report on the journey from like Plymouth to Gunnis Lake in a Class 150, because I think that's one of the most unusual and yet fascinating rail journeys in the UK, certainly Cornwall. Although saying that, the majority of the Plymouth to Gunnis Lake route is in Devon, and it's not until you go across the Calstock Viaduct on the former Kellington branch where you do finally cross over into Cornwall. But the other branch lines west of Plymouth are all, of course, entirely in Cornwall. Anyway, so now that we've left Essen Hauptbahnhof, that was essentially like the halfway, basically the halfway point on this journey. It really, I mean, as much as I like this Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr, it is still, I still can't shake the fact that it is very, very short. And in this instance, like, I mean, theoretically you can do the full length run in only 26 minutes when you're just doing this basic RE11 service with only 3 intermediate stops. As an aside, the station that's on the left here, that is Essen Fronthausen, which is another S-Bahn station. The one that we passed through about a kilometre back, I think that was Essen West. And one thing, I don't know too much about the German language, but one of the things I do know is that they pronounce the W as a V. So you could be like, I mean, if they put it this way, the German version of a Pet Shop Boys song would be Western Girls. And actually there was a station on the Frankfurt U-Bahn that is simply called Westend. And that's on lines U6, or on a section that's shared by lines U6 and U7. Or, as they would say in German, U6 und U7. And yeah, as always, when I drive these German trains and locomotives and TSW. By the way, trains and locomotives are not the same thing. Yeah, when I drive German stuff in this game and record videos on it, I do always like to apologise if and when I do get the pronunciations wrong. For instance, I'm still a bit fuzzy with this station with our next station stop at Mülheim Hauptbahnhof. Okay, so there's this 130 speed limit coming up. Even though there's still quite a few hundred metres left, I don't think I'll bother accelerating past that speed, because then I'll just have to slow down again in very quick succession. And if you try this, and hello, there's another BR146 with doppelstock coaches. Yeah, if you tried accelerating then decelerating like really, really fast in quick succession, that I imagine that would be very uncomfortable for the passengers. And I remember, like, when you, on the semi-rare occasions where I've actually ridden on a train here in New Zealand, although in our case it's nearly all locomotive hauled services, generally, yeah, the drivers are quite relaxed with their throttle inputs, I suppose you could say. I mean, they certainly don't do full throttle starts. And even in TSW, I only do, well, and Train Simulator for that matter, I would only do full throttle starts if I was pushed for time and essentially desperate to retain as much punctuality as possible. But in this instance, I think we're fine for the punctuality. Yes, I think I've said, I don't mean to blow my own trumpet or anything. Speaking of which, it's a very good, the trumpet's a very good ice cream. Anyway, I don't mean to blow my own trumpet, but I've noticed that for this run at least, I've seemed to have done a lot better with getting the stopping points right than I did with the BR423 the other day. Mind you, I suppose it could be because the 425 is easier to drive, or an easier stopping pattern on this route. I don't really remember. Mind you, that one I did with the BR423 was just an S-Bahn service. Well, no, it was an S-Bahn service with a lot more station stops than this one. Hello. Yeah, I was just saying earlier about the BR101, and there one goes. I don't know where that'll be going, but I dare say I would hazard a guess and say Cologne. So I'm pretty sure the BR101s do go through to Cologne in real life. Come to think of it, I don't think there'd be any major German cities where you won't see a BR101, even on freight. Well, that's the point. If anyone who's more knowledgeable on the BR101 locomotives is watching, do those things actually run freight services as well? Because generally, especially in TSW, you only see them on passenger workings. Another thing I've noticed about the BR101s is that sometimes they appear in these like really fancy advertising liveries, which is not really the sort of thing that I'm used to. I mean, I'm used to seeing like coaches and things, and like wagons especially, carrying advertising, but not locomotives. It's probably why I was so buzzed when that Amtrak ACS 64 was done up in that Phase 3 livery with the TSW advert. Speaking of like advertising liveries, you generally don't see that sort of thing like included as standard with add-ons in TSW, especially, well, even if it's like Dovetail or a third party, you generally just see the base DB or whatever, the base operator livery, which is especially notable with the BR422, because those things, some of those things are also in a green and white livery in real life, which I wouldn't mind seeing in the game, even though I don't particularly like that livery too much. But no, what I was about to say is that curiously, when Dovetail and Rivet, well, when Rivet Games brought out that sort of expansion pack for the, or anniversary edition, or whatever they called it, for that farcical Arosa line, they just, I think they included like 3 or 4 extra like really fancy anniversary liveries for the GE 4/4 Mark II, which is all fine and what have you, but yesterday when I was trying to load a scenario on the Arosa line, because I wanted to feature that route in the random train spotting video I made, for some reason the game crashed every time I tried to load a scenario on the Arosa line. Thank you, Rivet Games. You and your barely functioning rubbish. But no, it's weird. Like, I don't think I've got any mods installed for the Arosa line, and even then, I can't imagine why a mod would be responsible for making the route crash. Well, the game as a whole. But the weird thing is that this issue where it crashes while I'm trying to load a scenario or service only happens on the Arosa line. Like, it obviously doesn't seem to happen with other routes. It's certainly not Hauptstrecke Rhein-Ruhr here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be recording this video. But yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I know that there's one of the forum, like Dovetail Live forums, I believe, where you can go and report bugs like that, but I generally forget to do that, actually. Come to think of it, might have to, because it is rather annoying, and it's now one of two reasons why that route is unplayable, at least on my end. I mean, it's bad enough that you had that red signal glitch at Leuenkasteel, which made it absolutely impossible to complete journeys going like from Arosa to Chur. And now I've got this issue where for some reason it crashes every time you try loading a service or scenario. Yeah, I just think it's shocking that it's ended up in this state. And it certainly hasn't helped my opinion on Rivet Games and their products, although credit where it's due, the Isle of Wight is fine. It's, yeah, I think I'm going to boycott Rivet Games products, like future releases, and West Cornwall local for that matter. There's no way I'm getting that pathetic excuse for a route. Anyway, so now just getting back to the main subject of this video. We're just approaching, well, only just under a mile now from Duisburg Hauptbahnhof, but one thing I always remember about pulling into the station when you're coming in from the east is that this platform they assign you on, like this stop marker, is so unnervingly close to that red signal that yeah, it's so unnervingly close to that red signal that there's essentially no margin for error. Like either you undershoot the marker, or if you overshoot, you're done. And that is especially annoying, like if you end up overrunning or going through a red signal when you're right there at the end of your service. Okay, to guess what happened that time I tried driving the BR143 from Chemnitz to Dresden? God, I was livid. And that run took over an hour as well, and it was all for nothing. Typical. Anyway, here's the unrealistically quiet Duisburg Hauptbahnhof, although there was that other train there. And what's that there? That's a BR422. A pair of BR422s at that. Alright, now here's the challenge to try and not overshoot the stop marker. So sorry, I'm staying quiet. I'm just trying to just concentrating. And he's done it. And here we are at Duisburg Hauptbahnhof after a rather short journey from Bochum, which is hardly a surprise, really, considering I think this route's only about 35 kilometres long. But now that we've reached the end of our journey, I'll just take a little bit of time to say thank you. I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and that I hope that you've enjoyed this this unfortunately short run with this fascinating German EMU. And yeah, I hope that you'll stick around. You're more than welcome to stick around for future gameplay videos like this, or just like properly edited TSW videos from me or whatever else. I don't like to be one of those other YouTubers that is constantly asking people to subscribe. Like that's just not my thing, because I'm pretty annoyed by it myself, so I try not to do the same thing with my own videos. But yeah, I guess there's not really a lot else I can say now, so yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess take care everyone, and I'll see you next time.